Thanks again for joining us for our second Family Catechesis workshop. Once again, we're joined by Amy McEntee and George Barrett of RCL Benziger. And I'm grateful to both of them for leading us through these workshops on imagining new ways of forming and engaging children and their families with family catechesis. So in our time together today, we're going to briefly review what was covered in the first workshop. We'll discuss the Are We Family Friendly assessment homework assignment that you all had, and then we'll get into some of the practical strategies for becoming more family friendly in your faith formation ministries. So once again, I welcome our presenter, Amy McEntee. She's going to lead us now in prayer. Thanks, Amy.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be back with you again today, and just to share with you some more things about family catechesis. And so for our prayer today, we're going to use a little bit of technology. And so first of all, let me just say, if you are not feeling particularly tech savvy today, it is okay to skip this and just pray with us. That is perfectly fine. But if you're feeling like, okay, I'm going to participate a little bit more, if you're familiar with Mentimeter, what I would like for you to do is go to McEntee.com, that's MENTI.com, and you will be prompted to enter a code. And the code that you should enter to participate in our prayer this afternoon is 7072-6845. Again, that is 7072-6845. I will put that over in the chat. So it's Menti.com. And the code is 7072-6845. And again, this is just an interactive piece of the prayer. So if you are on your computer, you might want to either, minimize your Zoom screen and open up a browser next to it. If you're on your phone, you're going to have to go back and forth between your two apps, so make sure you know how to do that. And again, if you're just not feeling it, just pray with us. Put it in the chat. Just pray with us today.
Amy, I'm going to hop in real quick. Maybe it's just me, but the code's not working. Oh, someone else had said too, the code can't be found.
Well, that's annoying. Give me just 1 second to verify my code here.
Thank you.
That's because I had it half right. So again, let me put it back over here in the chat. The correct code is 77096845. Sorry about that. All right. There we go. Copy and paste fail. Sorry about that. All right, so as you are joining over on Menti, and again, just settling into some time of prayer, it's later in the day. It's later into the day. So just taking a moment to be mindful that we are in the presence of God, a God who loves us, a God who loves families. And just take a moment to set aside the busyness of the day, to take a deep breath, to catch our breath, and to take a moment as we enter into this time of prayer. And so remembering that we are always in the presence of our loving and compassionate God, we begin with the sign of our faith in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. And for a few moments, I want you to think over the last year, or over the last 15 months or so. And so as you reflect on that, we offer in prayer, what are the losses that you are grieving? So as we name the losses of catechists, of gatherings, the loss of our loved ones and of our friends, those who have suffered, contact with people, loss of relationships, loss of mental wellness, the loss of hugs. So we take all these losses and we offer them to the Lord. And I ask you again to reflect on the last year, the last 15 months, and to name for what or for whom are you grateful? And so we take this moment to offer gratitude for those who worked for the vaccine, for the ability to reopen, for our families, for the technology that kept us connected when it was frustrating at times, for the peace that we have found in nature, for our ability to work, for our prayer groups, for sunshine, for siblings, for Zoom, for God's abiding presence. And for all these things, we give thanks to the Lord. And again, reflecting on the last year and those last 15 months, what's been a new or unexpected joy that you have experienced during these unique and difficult times? So for that joy of coming back to work in person, for deeper connections, for our parish groups that have continued on, for the ability to gather online, for that trust, for time with our spouse, with our families, for grandchildren, for collaboration, for community. For knowing our catechist gifts. And so we take all of these losses, all of these joys, our moments of sorrow, our moments of gratitude, and we pray, God of compassion and grace, and your steadfast love accompany us. As you ever work to restore and to renew your people, overcome bitterness with your joy, hatred with your love, brokenness with your life, and give us hope through the death and resurrection of your Son, Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. So I thank you for that fabulous sharing. This is it's always a gift when we have this opportunity to share both our losses and our joys with one another. That prayer at the end is actually from the Book of Catholic Household Blessings and Prayers. But it has been such a rich, there's so much richness in there, in that idea of, overcoming bitterness, that overcoming hatred, that I have just found great comfort in that prayer. So again, I thank you for taking that time to reflect with me over how the last year has gone. And so now, again, just setting up my screens here. Sorry, we're flipping between things. There we go. So in the chat, if you would, I know some of you were with us 2 weeks ago. Some of you are perhaps new. So if you would, in the chat, please indicate where are you in your parish in implementing family catechesis. So you can either type it out, or you can just give that letter, A, B, C, or D. Are you just exploring, just getting some new ideas? Are you planning to start family catechesis in the fall? Are you starting family catechesis sometime in the future? Or are you an experienced person just looking for some new ideas and some new ways to work with your families? All right. We have quite a few who are just exploring family catechesis. Oh, Janet says over 20 years moving to all family catechesis. She's your expert. Go find Janet. Have done some in the past, want to do some more. All right. Feel free to keep putting your answers in the chat as we continue to move through here. We will use this a little bit later to talk about some groupings so that you can have some opportunities to talk with one another. Rachel says it's a blend of A and D. Went to a hybrid model in the past year, looking to implement with more intentionality. Yeah, a lot of people moved to that family catechesis because of COVID. So we're looking for some new ways to do this. I'm not sure if I shared this with you last time. Before I came to work for RCL Benziger, I worked in a parish and I worked for the Archdiocese of Cincinnati and implemented in different parishes varying degrees of family catechesis, from large family gatherings that were for everyone to working with families that were doing catechesis in their home as a group of families. So it's kind of ran the whole gamut. So it is just, we've had these things that kind of have been, for many people, family catechesis is something we knew we should be doing, but then the pandemic kind of forced us into new ways of doing ministry. And so we are in that place where we're looking more intentionally about how do we engage families. So just as a reminder, to recap briefly, the last time that we were together, for those of you who were able to join us, we talked about the relationship between families and the faith community. And our directory for catechesis, which is just about a year old, talks about that relationship as being one of a reciprocal relationship, that the family is the church of the home and that the faith community is the family of families. And according to the Directory for Catechesis, the community, the role of the community is to help mark out paths of faith for families so that they have a clear awareness of their mission, so that we are accompanying them and supporting them in their tasks of transmitting life, of education, and of promoting a family spirituality, so that we have to have this awareness of what's happening with families, so that we can help them have a lens of faith through which to view their lives. And we talked about the many ways in which families carry out that mission of the church in their homes. And so the mission of the church of the home is an extension of the mission of the whole church. And so this is from Follow the Way of Love, which was a pastoral letter from the United States bishops in 1994. So the two documents we just named there, we have 1994 and we have 2020. So again, just reiterating that notion that family catechesis is something that has been kind of happening around us for a long time. And so we look at those ways that families carry out the mission of the church. And then I gave you a little homework assignment, which was to do the assessment of how family friendly is your parish. So if you received your resource guide, the assessment was on page 74. So I think Deb is going to put up the poll for us. If you were not with us the last session, or if you did not complete the assessment, just kind of respond on your own impression. So how family friendly is your parish? So as we're watching this in real time, we're seeing a lot of we're okay, but we could use some improvement. Just good. Just good. Just another 30 seconds for those of you who are perhaps figuring out how to work those polls. All right, it looks like with 70% of participants have voted. Deb, were you going to jump in here?
Yep, I was just going to say I've ended the poll. I shared the results, I think.
You did. Okay. Thank you.
There you go.
So 50% of you said we are doing okay, but we could use some improvement, mostly 3s on that survey. Second was mostly 4s, which is great news. I'm glad to hear that, we have parishes that are doing good work for our families. And then 11% of you responded with mostly 2s and just 1, not at all. So thank you for sharing with us how you did on that poll. And so then you'll remember the second part of that was what was most important. And I mentioned to you last time that sometimes we can be really good at doing things that are not very important. And so I would like just to discuss briefly, as you looked at that assessment, what came up to say this is the most important thing that we can do for families, or perhaps what needs your most attention. That's a typo. So feel free to unmute yourselves and then share kind of with the whole group. What is the most important area for family friendliness in your parish, or what is it in your parish that needs the most attention? We have a shy group.
Hi, it's Elizabeth Fox. Oops, sorry. Did I cut somebody
Go
off?
ahead, Elizabeth. You go.
Oh, Janet. I think I worry about our parish being friendly on our own terms and being welcoming on our own terms. So we are friendly and welcoming as long as you're willing to assimilate into who we are and what we do. And sometimes I worry that we're not, if you have different ideas or different thoughts, that we're not necessarily as welcoming to you. We want people that think like us, because that's easier. So that's where I think we need some attention.
Interesting. Thank you. That's a really great insight. I think, Janet, you were going to speak.
I was going to say similar, and also that the most important area in your parish, I think that a lot of parishes live in silos. Youth ministry is really great, school is really great, religious ed really great, RCIA is really great, but we need to pay attention to making it welcome to everyone. So parents and younger siblings should be able to go to some youth ministry events, or some religious ed events, or some school events should be open to the whole parish, not just to the school. I think we have to remember that we're one faith community, one faith family.
So that cohesiveness, the how do we have that kind of baseline of welcome and integration that exists in families, how is that reflected across all of the ministries of our parish? Would that be a fair summary? Thank you. Anyone else? What's the most important, or what needs your most attention? Or maybe it's, what do you need to stop doing?
Well, I listed as number one that first thing: how well do we know the families in our parish school? And I would take it even beyond the people that are coming to church. I think in our whole community, we live in where our church is situated now. It's formerly like about a 100% Catholic neighborhood. Now it's become a young professional neighborhood, and most of the people who are our neighbors are unchurched. And we want to get to know them. We're thinking of all kinds of strategies as to how we can get to know the young people who now predominate in the demographic of our parish, and get them interested in the church.
Okay. So getting to know the people who are in your community. How are you a Catholic presence to all people, not just those who come through your doors?
Exactly.
That's a great effort.
One of the things that we're starting to do, okay, we're going to start giving tours of the church, okay, open to the public, so that people on various Sundays will be able to come in and, just out of curiosity, see what the church is all about, and hear a little bit about what we believe as Catholics.
That's awesome. Anyone else? What's important? What needs attention? Maybe what worked well during COVID that you want to build on? So, several of you said in the last year you did family catechesis, and now you want to be more intentional about it. So what did your assessment kind of bring to the surface?
Hi, I think one area that we are lacking on, not only perhaps in my parish, but around the Archdiocese, is the youth group. The youth ministry is, it somehow they have kind of like drift apart, from every parish, actually. Once they complete the sacrament of confirmation, they are gone pretty much. And so that part is actually one of the most important parts all around the Archdiocese. They are our future, but it seems we are not doing like enough, for them. And we seriously, it's kind of like we need to come up, with something, because they are our future. They are the Catholics that are going to actually, take the wheel, once we are actually older, and we are not going to be able to do everything. So as much as I know there is so many people so dedicated to different ministries around the parishes, however, if we do not teach them, if we do not engage them and keep them in the parish community, life is going to be very hard for Catholics.
That's a really excellent point, and I'm so grateful that you brought that up. So when we talk about family catechesis, I'm sorry, I don't remember who it was. Someone in the last session talked about that. We talk about families, and we tend to default as families as being parents who have small children, but families are our whole life cycle. And so when we talk about family catechesis, we do have to be aware of those gaps. So if if we don't have a visible presence of youth who are active in our parish, our second graders think, oh, well, when I get to 8th grade, I don't do this anymore. So it's how do we normalize that involvement across all of those age spans is an important consideration in family faith formation, not just for the future of the church, but also for those little people who are looking up right now and recognizing, that sometimes, even if you want to think of other activities and other models that youth are involved in, when you play sports. So my nieces, I think I shared with you, are 8 and 13, which is a good gap because the 8-year-old absolutely wants to play softball with the same team that my older niece plays for right now. They look at that older generation of kids or that older group of kids in that cohort and say, oh, I want to do that. So that is an important consideration. Anyone else before we move on? What came to the surface? What needs attention? What'd you learn? What are you thinking about?
I'm going to add on to what you were just saying, because in our parish, I think our biggest need is addressing the family life cycle thing. And even in the pandemic, I think this was pretty much true of all parishes. They stopped all baptismal prep classes. Now we're starting to get back into it, but and here's the thing is, at least in our parish, all these kids are coming forth to be baptized now. None of them have been catechized at all, because it's just get them out. We have all this backup of baptisms, and we have a huge gap from baptism to RE or parish schools. We have youth ministry too, but then we have another huge gap for college age kids, young adults. And a lot of people in our parish have this idea of, well, we don't have a lot of young adults here because either they just live with their parents or they all moved to the city because I'm a suburban church. And I'm like, no, we still have kids, there's a need here. But we have all these big gaps. And the problem is if I bring it up, they're like, okay, Barb, you do it. And I'm like, no, I can't do all of that. We need to work together. But it's kind of like nobody wants to take on more work either. But we're doing a huge disservice because we have these gaping holes in the family life cycle, at least in my parish.
Right. Yeah.
To piggyback off of what Barb just said, same thing. I feel like across the board, you have a young family that comes in with a baby to get baptized, and then they leave and they don't come back to church. We don't see them anymore. And then they might bring their child back in 1st, 2nd, sometimes 3rd grade. And, oh, my kid needs First Communion now. Now it's time for First Communion. So I always, again, wanted to do something for our parish, but just like with you, Barb, we can't take everything on. We need people to step up and want to start some sort of ministry that, would serve to those people, even if it's like a coffee and or a let's gather the kids together and the families together to do something. Obviously, this was pre-COVID, but once things get back to normal, why can't we do something like that?
So again, minding those gaps and looking at that family life cycle, and kind of trying to have this idea. These are some of the pieces that we need to have in mind when we're talking about family catechesis. So, last time that if you were here, I maybe frustrated you because I didn't just say, oh, just do this and it's fine. It is that reality of that family life is messy. Even our most together families have just messiness in their life. And so when we talk about family catechesis, it's not going to be tidy, but we do have to kind of hold these pieces in tension of what is the real stuff of our families that they're dealing with. What do we want for them? What's that priority? What are the gaps? Where are we losing people? What are the entrance points and the exit points in the marketing language that they use about this? When they talk about how do you bring a consumer into your store and what causes them to leave? It's marketing language, but the reality is it's human behavior. And so we do have to be a little bit aware of that. And so one more thing that I am not going to spend a lot of time talking about, but that I just want you to consider is what's your why? Why do you want to do family catechesis? And so you might be thinking, Amy, we've covered this. We know that our current model just isn't working. The church has told us that parents are the primary educators, and on and on and on and on and on. And I assure you, I am not that dense. I know. I know that you know. But I want you to consider, what is the why for your parish? When you go to your catechist and say, we're going to make this change, what is the why that is going to be compelling for them? When you go to your families and you say, we're making this change, what is the why that is going to make them say, you know what, I want this for us too? And the reason I ask that is that we cannot just say, well, the church says that you're the primary educator, so here's a book, good luck, because that will not accomplish our goal in forming lifelong disciples of Jesus. And that's what you all just talked about, is that lifelong discipleship, that we are keeping people in the fold, so to speak, across the life cycle. And so one of the things that we need to think about is, when we want to better engage our families in catechesis, we have to think about the ways that we could do this, and how are we going to invite them into that deeper relationship with Jesus and with the church. So if we just change the model of faith formation, we will not necessarily accomplish that goal of inviting people into lifelong faith. Some of them won't even notice that that was the goal. They may not know now. And so if you just say, well, you know, we were doing it here in our classrooms with this book, but we want you to do it at home with this book, they might go, okay. All you've done is change their location for them. So even in the corporate world, again, so I have a master's degree in theology. I also have a master's degree in business. It's weird. It's a long story. But even in the corporate world, sustained change is driven by people. And change that fails because companies and corporations focus on systems instead of the people who have to use those systems or manufacture those systems, or, you know, so it has to be oriented in people. And so we have to begin with our families, and we have to think about, how might we establish that reciprocal relationship between the faith community and families? How might we do that? How might we better equip parents to be witnesses to their children? How can we help parents have a language of faith, so that when they're talking to their children, whether their children are 2 or 22 or 62, that they have a language of faith that they can say, this is why this is important to me? How might we support parents in establishing a family spirituality? And I will tell you that family spirituality is a lot easier to establish when your children are infants. You know, you want to talk about that baptism prep. How do we help families establish family spirituality so that when they are 12 and they know how to roll their eyes, you know, that this is still the thing that we do. We have very good friends. My husband and I have very good friends who live up near Cleveland. They have 7 children. And their family ritual is that as each child would go out the door or go to work or wherever, their ritual for leaving the house is that the parent would say, this is the day that the Lord has made. And the child would respond, let us rejoice and be glad in it. And sometimes it's, let us rejoice and be glad in it, because they're 12. But it's such a ritual, it's such a thing that when their adult children are visiting at home, they say it with the child who is leaving the house, because they have established that family spirituality. And we might also say, how do we provide opportunities for people of all ages to establish and grow in a relationship with Jesus Christ and the church? Because that's the goal of catechesis. You know, and I work in formal catechesis. I work in the knowledge stuff, but it's not just about that knowledge stuff. It's about helping families to have a language and an opportunity to say, where is God in all of this? So like our opening prayer today was just a prompt and an opportunity for people to share. So you could ask your families those same questions. Just gather families together, whether you do it on Zoom or in person, and say, what was the last year like? And just give them that opportunity to talk with one another. Because if we find it difficult to have relationships with people, we often will find it difficult to have a relationship with God. And so when you're thinking about family catechesis and how can we do these tasks of catechesis that the church calls us to, sometimes it's important to go back to those basics and say, how do we help people develop relationship skills so that they can develop relationships as a family, as a faith community, and with God. So I'm going to leave that there for right now. And I just want to say that you should have received your family faith resource guide. If you have not received it, you should get it shortly. And within the guide, in this first, you will notice that our sections are color coded. So the green section at the front, the ones that have this little green border at the top, that's the planning section. We did that on purpose. And it gives you some additional considerations for planning and for managing change, and how do you get other people on board, and how do you evaluate, is this working? And I really want to encourage you to prayerfully consider some of that as you are looking at what's the next step. We're going to move on and talk a little bit about models and curriculum and those kinds of things, but there's a lot of little good tidbits that are in that section that will help you kind of think through, what is our why, and how might we invite people into these things in a way that honors their dignity, that honors the holy stuff that's happening in their lives, and that provides those opportunities for them to grow as families and to move beyond that. So the change management is hard. It's hard to build sustainable differences, but there's some tools in there that I think you might find some good nuggets there. And I'm happy to answer questions about it. I just know many of you really want to know that, well, how do you put this all together? So let's talk about some models that might serve the people in your parish. Keeping in mind, we have to start with the people. So this slide right here is actually from the original survey that I sent out before we started the webinars. Deb sent this out for me. And there were about 20 people who participated. And so take-home resources and ideas was by far the most common model used. And I just want to say, don't stop that model, because it works with everything else. No matter what you're doing, being able to resource people and to just give them some little ideas that they can use right now is really, it's why Pinterest is so popular. You know, if you think about how we do social media, life hacks, those little ideas, the short little video clips on, you know, here's how to clean your house in 15 minutes a day. People are interested in those short little things. So keep doing that, no matter what model you move to. That helps fill in the gaps when people say, you know, I don't have a family spirituality, but I also don't have little kids. You can help fill that gap so that you don't have to do everything, but you can still be throwing something their way. Some of you have tried the entirely parent-led at home. I think some of you probably tried that because of COVID, and some of you have worked with whole family gatherings, either monthly or throughout the year, and some have done some of the parent-only gatherings. And so I invite you later, when we get into small groups, we're going to talk about, you know, ask people what they've done, because there's clearly a ton of wisdom in this group of people who are gathered here. I mentioned to you before that I worked in parishes, and we did lots of different varying degrees of models of family catechesis. So before I move from the slide, I have one other little unsolicited advice to offer you. The very first parish, I actually became Catholic as an adult, and the very first parish that I worshiped in and worked in and was welcomed in and was initiated in did a program early 2000s called Generations of Faith. If you're familiar with it, cool. If not, that's irrelevant. But it was whole families coming together, and it was whole community catechesis. And so we had senior couples, we had people with small children, we had newlywed couples. You know, we promoted it to the whole parish. And we had some things that were very successful, and there were other things that we did abysmally wrong. You know, it's one of those that I will go, this is how I learned what not to do in family catechesis. And the reason I bring that up is that if you have tried something in the past and it has not gone well, don't give up on it. Take that opportunity to say, well, this part worked, and how can we recover from these other pieces that didn't work well? So when somebody says to you, we tried it and it didn't work, push back on that and say, well, what did work? Or why didn't it work? Because there's so much that you can learn from those things, that when you have tried something that didn't go very well, you can learn something from it. And sometimes it's just timing. You know, sometimes it was just too soon or not the right group of people. And just because it didn't work then doesn't mean it won't work now. So anyway, moving ahead on that, the directory for catechesis, again, this directory just came out last year, so our resource guide had already been in publication for a full year before we got the new directory. It gives us two interesting considerations about methodology that are a little bit unique to this particular one. And the first one is it talks about the importance of the group. And so the directory says to us, the Christian community is the primary agent of catechesis. For this reason, catechetical pedagogy must make every effort to convey the importance of community as a fundamental space for personal growth. Paying attention to group relationships develops the sense of belonging to the church and assists growth in the faith. This applies to all age brackets. And it actually continues from there to talk about the importance of groups within, and that importance of community in the catechetical process. And because the purpose of catechesis is that relationship with Jesus, relationships, group dynamics, how we interact in groups are how people experience the love of God. And so if we say that God is love and people come into our catechetical experiences and do not experience love, we are liars. And so it is important to keep in mind when you're thinking through family catechesis and whatever model, how are we utilizing the group as the catechetical tool? So if you're still doing classroom model, age-based kid groups, how are you helping them to form relationships with one another? If you were doing whole families or you're doing parent-led, how are you helping those families to develop relationships with other families in the faith community, other people of faith? How are you helping parents to connect in with the parent group? Okay, so the group, the community is a catechetical method. And that's part of what the directory for catechesis reminds us, is that it helps us to develop a sense of belonging. And when we have a place to belong, that's when we can start to unpack those questions about identity, about God, about who we are as people of faith. So don't underestimate the importance of the group. And the second one that the directory gives this special emphasis on is catechetical spaces. And it says, it is true that the dynamic of the church that goes forth, that missionary initiative that we go forth, that goes through catechesis also has implications with regard to space. Encouragement should be given to attempts at catechesis in different places: the home, the office, educational, cultural, and recreational environments, prisons, etc. These places are suitable for casual catechesis because they create more familiar relationships, and in this more visible connection with everyday life, catechesis can turn out to be more compelling. So it's saying that when catechesis happens in a place that's not necessarily the church, but it's not necessarily a classroom, that gives us a more integrated faith experience, so that we recognize that the God question is not something we do when we're old and we're about to die, but which a lot of kids think, especially middle schoolers are like, oh, I'll deal with that when I'm old. But that it is an integrated part of our life. And so classrooms that look like a school, and this is not a dig against Catholic schools. Catholic schools provide amazing ministries. But when our faith formation spaces look like classrooms, when they have homework like a school, they sometimes can unintentionally give this idea that religion is a subject to be learned rather than a relationship to be lived. And this is true if we just take that same model. If we say, here's your textbook and here's your quiz and log on to Zoom for this classroom session, but they're doing it at home, we still are unintentionally giving that idea that religion is just a subject. It's like math, it's like reading. And so we just need to be thoughtful about how do we use space, how do we use groups in order to promote this relationship with Jesus and with the church that is the body of Christ. And so this does not mean that we throw out all formal catechesis. It doesn't mean we get rid of textbooks. It means we're thoughtful about how do those pieces come together so that the relational and the spiritual components are being developed and nourished alongside the knowledge-based aspects in a way that makes sense for the learner. Does that make sense? Give me a thumbs up if you're good. Thank you. I appreciate that. All right. So interestingly enough, the Directory for Catechesis does not say get rid of your textbooks, which is good for those of us at RCLB and at all of our publishing companies. It also does not say get rid of formal catechesis. In fact, it makes a specific distinction about the role of the catechist, the role of parents within catechesis, the role of godparents within catechesis. And it doesn't give us a singular model to use. What the directory does tell us is that the catechumenate, so that process we use in RCIA, that gradual unfolding and deepening of faith, is the model for all catechesis. That doesn't mean that you take your second grade class and you make it second grade class RCIA. That's not what it means. It just means that we have to be aware of where people are, even little people, in their development of faith and what's the next reasonable step. That's the process of accompaniment, of how we walk with them, of how we learn what makes sense to them, of how we provide them with a God and an experience of God who cares about their daily lives. And so that's the reality, is everything is on the table. And it's up to us to be creative in how we arrange these pieces in order to meet the needs and the gifts of our learners, of our families. And that's going to look different at everyone's parish. You can't just lift a program from somebody else's parish and drop it into yours and expect it to work in exactly the same way. So what are some ideas here? So this in your faith formation, your family catechesis guide, this is the orange section, has models for family catechesis. And it's not limited to what's there. We just gave you a smattering of things here. So maybe you do an age-specific cohort. So cohorts might sound a lot like grade-specific classroom model. Like, why are you saying do the same thing? At my last parish that I worked at, we knew that our parish was not ready to move to all at-home parent-led faith formation. We were a military parish that had lots of parents who were deployed. We had parents who that just wasn't what they were used to. They were used to, I bring my kid, I drop them off, I pick them up an hour and a half later, we're done. So as a staff, we said, how can we start putting people together in groups that respects where they are on their faith journey without throwing parents to the wolves? And so one of the things that we did is we started picking a theme and providing resources and programming that covered that theme from every age group. So our first year we did prayer, and during each liturgical season, we gave them a different prayer style to experience. And we did it across all of the age groups. And so we gave a very modified liturgy of the hours, where we gave one sentence to pray when you get out of bed, when you have lunch, when you're going to bed, to our littlest of kids. And we gave the whole experience of liturgy of the hours to the older adults who were interested, and varying degrees in between. We did the examen. How do you pray the examen as a couple? How do you pray it as a family? How do you pray it as an individual? So we just picked with one prayer style per liturgical season and did it across all the age groups, and then gave them opportunities to have conversations. And so the cohort was, I'm doing this age appropriate prayer style, but because I have a common experience across those age groups, I can talk with my kids or with my parents about that. So that would be one thing. You know, another way to think of it is, okay, so what if you gather your intermediate age kids, so your 4th, 5th, and 6th graders, but you put in one small group. These are all the kids who are really into art. What if you said, you know what? Most of our kids who need to be confirmed this year are on the basketball team, and we're going to work through junior high basketball team is going to be your small group. What can we teach about confirmation that through basketball? I'm making stuff up here literally as I speak. But those are some of the ideas that when you think of cohorts, how can we put people together in groups that are not just based on what grade are you in school, but that are based in how might you experience God? Where are you in your faith journey? What do you have in common that can help you to form relationships with one another that both are peer groups, but also then go across those peer groups? So family clusters. One of the things we need to be careful of with families is that we are not prioritizing perfect families. You know, we need to leave room for abuelas and the aunties and the papas who are also part of these faith experiences. Sometimes it's an older sibling who's going to do faith formation with the younger sibling. So when we talk about family clusters, first of all, we need to be mindful of that our families all look different. And then thinking about how can we put families together in relationship with one another. So some of you have already done whole family gatherings. If you look in our family faith, there are some family gatherings for you. I'm going to talk about those again in a minute. But you also could say, you know what, instead of being assigned to a grade level this year, I'm going to give this catechist 3 families. And these families have kids who are similar ages, or maybe they live in the same neighborhood. And we're going to help them to figure out how to do faith formation as a family group, as a group of families. Maybe you do it in a neighborhood and you let them figure out kind of what's the rhythm of neighborhood life that makes sense. Or a station or activity based kind of families come together and they move through different stations. Some of our public schools, some of our Catholic schools have math night or literacy night that's based on that same principle. So how can families are familiar with that model, a little bit less now because of COVID, but prior to that, they were familiar with that. It's family night and we're all gonna come do these activities. And so how do we think about the ways we can arrange families creatively? And again, that doesn't just have to be your families with kids. You know, we have a very transient society. And so some of our families live far away from parents and grandparents. And so maybe we can pair them with a young couple who is interested in, you know, they're newly married and they're interested in family life. So how can we put those together in different configurations? Before I move off of family clusters, I just want to do a brief little what's included in the Family Faith Resource Guide. The blue section, so the one that has the blue heading, is step-by-step instructions for family gatherings. These are written to be intergenerational. Sometimes they have all of families together. Sometimes they split them out by age groups. It depends on the topic. There are 5 that are included in the book, and they cover topics that are specifically catechetical, like prayer and mass and those kinds of things. But they also address how do we have rituals in our home? How do we do celebrations of special times as a family? How do we communicate well? In addition to the 5 that are in the book, if you look in the front of the book, it talks about Flourish access. And so on Flourish, which is our digital platform, there are 10 additional sessions. And again, they are written to be both catechetical, but also what's the stuff that families need to address? So how do we talk about appropriate technology use? How do we talk about body image? That's actually one of my most favorite sessions that is available, is how do we have family conversations about healthy body image? Common good. So they are written that you can pretty much just take them. They have a script to them. They are there. 5 of those sessions are also available in Spanish. So they are digitally available in Spanish. They are not available in the book in Spanish. So if you have more questions about how those pieces all work together, make sure you get with George. He's going to be the one who can help you with that. But when we were really sitting down to talk about how do we have families that talk together, we recognize that it can't just be the prayer, God, Jesus, Bible, Mass. Those are all important. But, you know, sometimes the priority in our family is we're not communicating very well at all. And so we're not going to have a good conversation unless we can figure out how we communicate better. Or, you know, our technology gets in our way. How can we have a healthy relationship with technology? So this idea of giving families a theological lens to have conversations about their family life. So that was kind of when we approached this, that was some of what we were looking at. Not just what's kind of typically included in our textbooks, if that makes sense. Okay, commercial over. A summer model. Okay, let a little bit of truth telling here. I mentioned to you that I became Catholic as an adult. The weirdest thing for me was when I realized that Catholic faith formation stops during the summer. I had no concept of that prior to becoming Catholic. So with the church I grew up in, you just went to Sunday school every Sunday, and then one Sunday was promotion Sunday, and the next week you went to a different classroom. So I think we need to be thoughtful about how do we use summer, but also how do we use alternative timing methods. A great example of this is that universities have started using downtime differently. So there are certain, I just finished a degree, an online degree not too long ago, and they had a 3-week session in January that they called intensives. And you could get an entire course done in that 3-week period where they were technically on Christmas break, but they had certain courses that they would fit into that little kind of intensive program. So how can we think differently about our religious education, our faith formation cycle, so that we aren't so locked into a school model? Because again, that accidentally gives this idea that this is the same as school, which means we graduate from it at some point, and we don't. We don't graduate from faith formation. So maybe you do a kind of kicked up vacation Bible school. So if you, again, I'm just familiar with our product. So Be My Disciples has an entire book that is written, that is the director's guide for doing Be My Disciples curriculum in a summer intensive program. It's a summer program. It's like 2 or 3 weeks. It gives you different, if you do it over 2 weeks, if you do it over 3 weeks, what does the day look like? If you do half days, if you do full days, what does that look like? And then plugging in some of that additional programming throughout the year so that you don't lose touch with your families. So what would that be like? What would it be like if you took the summer and said, we're going to do service and relationship building opportunities for all age groups all summer long? And then we're going to use the relationships that they build over the summer. We're going to unpack that in that more formalized catechesis throughout the rest of the year, but not just for your youth group kids, not just for your young adults, but for all ages. What would that look like? The last parish I was in, I had a little, there were about 6 of them. 6 junior high aged boys that were all on the same travel basketball team. And rather than wrestle with, you're here this week, you're gone, here's your homework because you're traveling on the weekends with your basketball team, we gave them a basketball season length curriculum that they did as a small group. And we had one parent who took the lead on it. And a lot of times at tournaments in between games, they were doing their faith formation. And you know, I know some people, even my pastor was really worried about how good is it really going to be if they're doing it on the gym floor between faith formation sessions. But one of the things that one of the families shared with me is that certain tournaments, they had other kids who came over and joined their conversation. It became a really incredible evangelizing experience that we said, for this time period, we're going to give you this arrangement for your catechetical experience. We're going to give this to families, and we trust you to get this done and let us know how we can help. So again, looking at those alternative timing models. I know a lot of schools for COVID asked parents to commit to a particular model for a semester. So if you wanted to be at home for the semester. If you want to be in person for the semester. At least here in Ohio, they did that. And I think that we maybe need to think through some of our family situations would really be served well by that. Again, in my last parish, we had lots of families that were just dealing with custody issues. And so mom or dad, or sometimes grandma, had these 3 kids or these 2 kids every other weekend. And so just sending home homework, to keep them up to speed didn't work because they didn't have the time in that back and forth to do that. So working with those families that were experiencing that to say, how can we put together, how can we use these resources? What are you willing to do to be a partner with us? To kind of build this, again, looking at an alternative timing model. And then of course is the home-based model there. So this could be as simple as, like I said, giving families a theological question or a theological lens to do a daily or a weekly examine. To ask that question, where did you see God this week? I have this is just a jar. It's a mason jar with tissue paper on it. And these are little prayer prompt questions that give families, so this one says, pray for those who help. Pray for teachers, firefighters, police officers, military, bus drivers. Who else would you like to pray for? That's a really basic question, but it helps us, then you can build on it when they get older. How does God help you? So giving them that real simple prompt, this can be a way to do at home, giving families a language of faith on the day-to-day basis. And this right here, you put this jar on your table. So if you eat dinner at the dinner table or at the coffee table or in the cup holder in your minivan, it's 5-minute catechesis. And it might not be much, but for some families, that's more than they're doing on a daily basis, and it will help and it will make a tremendous difference. So some of it is just that. Give them an at-home model. You could do this with lectionary-based catechesis. So at RCLB, and I know some of the other publishing companies do this as well, we actually have a chart that says this is the reading for the 11th Sunday in ordinary time, and this is the lesson in this book that has the same theme of that. We have those lectionary-based catechesis charts available. Like I said, I know several other publishers do as well. So maybe it is that really tying into that liturgical experience. If you're going to Mass still online, or if you're going in person, here's a further explanation at an age-appropriate way that can unpack that. So maybe it is liturgically based and tying into the lectionary cycle. You might do catechist-led online sessions. I know some parishes are continuing this even post-COVID because it was, families not having to have the 20-minute drive and trying to eat dinner in that 20-minute drive really worked for them to have a more positive experience of faith formation. So keeping that where the catechists are there, the parents are there to help, but it's an online session. Doing those parent-led sessions. So again, we have both for Be My Disciples and for Blessed Are We Faith in Action, we have family guides and an at-home guide. It depends on which series you use, determines what it's called. But we have those resources for parents that we're not just expecting parents to know how to put a lesson together or to know how to ask an age-appropriate question, but that we're giving them the tools to have a meaningful conversation with their kids, and that we're giving them opportunities to invite other people into that conversation. So, sometimes it's saying, call grandma and ask this, or call your godmother and ask this, or call your uncle. Your uncle likes to hunt. Where does he see God in nature? Like, it can be as simple as asking a great question, or giving families the opportunity, again, to gather as families and to help resource them when they're going to gather together. So maybe it's 3 families that their kids all ride the bus together. And so we're going to have them gather in homes. But again, being creative to think through how can we bring families together? But a key factor is that we also are keeping them tied into our parishes. No matter what model you choose, we do not want this to become out of sight, out of mind. And so we have to have a relationship with them that we haven't just handed them a textbook and said, good luck, call me if you need me. You know, how are you as a leader going to check in with them? How are you going to accompany them? You know, one of the places that I started in my most recent parish is I asked my catechists, what were they willing to do with their own families? Because catechists have already volunteered more time. All right, they've already done that little bit extra. And so starting with what are you willing to do with your families, and then picking one week a month. That's what we started with, is 1 week a month is family session. And how do we configure that? So some months it was families come into our classrooms and our catechists do activities where the kids are teaching the parents. Sometimes it was we send this activity home for families to do on their own time. You know, but we picked one Sunday that we really focused on engaging families, even within our classroom model, to build up to parents feeling confident in their ability to be leaders of faith. Because so many of our parents question, am I a good parent? And that doesn't matter if your kids are 3 or 3 months or 33, there are parents going, am I a good parent? And so how do we help build their confidence and give them that support in that, so that our families can have that experience of an authentic relationship and recognizing that God loves them, and that God offers them life, and that God offers us life abundantly, and that we experience that love in our communities. All right, I am going to stop sharing for just a minute. So our next task is going to be that I'm going to send you over into small groups to talk about what do you need to do next. But before I do that, is there any questions, anything you would like me to clarify before we bump over to that, or anything you'd like to share with the rest of the group? There's a lot of experience and wisdom here.
Amy, if you check the chat, there was one question there related to your sustained change quote.
Yes, sustained change is always, and it's not an exact quote, but it is sustained change is based on people. And so when we prioritize systems over people, that is when change fails. So people, we have to think about who has to operate within this system, who has to implement it, who has to live with it. And that's why we have to focus on people over systems. Anything else before we bump you over into some breakout groups? Okay. So what's going to happen next is just to capture what you're thinking, what you're feeling, what you're hearing. You know, kind of, I hope your imagination is starting to run a little bit wild. We are created in the image and likeness of our Creator God, and so we all are creative because God is the creator. So what we're going to do is, I believe Deb is going to give you some options of breakout groups, and you are going to be able to select. I recommend that you select based on where are you in this process. So if you are just starting to think about family catechesis, join that group to think about people and with other people who are just starting to think about family catechesis. And the question that I want you to consider is, what is your next faithful step? What do you need to do next? So wherever you are now, what needs to happen next? To move your families, to move your community into this reciprocal relationship with God and one another. So as you're coming back, I think, yeah, it looks like most of you are already back. Yes, everybody's back? All right. If you would like, let's start this way. Go ahead and put in the chat what was a great idea you heard. Nobody needs to know if it was your own idea that you think was the greatest idea you heard. Just put it in the chat. But what's a great idea that you heard, or something that you will keep in mind? So if you can just share that, so that we can hear the wisdom from across groups. If you wouldn't mind just dropping over into the chat right now, what was a great idea that you heard? Online sessions for snow days. Yep. Poor kids who will never know what a true snow day is anymore. Oh, come on. I know you had more ideas than just that one. If you would rather unmute and share your great idea that way, feel free to do that as well. Oh, see, now we're getting some more action in the chat, but you may feel free to go ahead and unmute if you would rather share by speaking. Some of the things we're seeing over the chat is having parents attend with students on First Communion, using a hybrid method for meeting together. And, hybrid can mean all sorts of things. So hybrid could mean we have small groups that go out and meet for part of the time and they come back and meet as a big group. It could mean we have parents with kids for part of the time and then we have them in age groups for part of the time. We can claim hybrid to be whatever we want. It doesn't have to just be online and in person. So we're hearing about adapting to family schedules, seeing grandparents sharing faith with children. Grandparents are a fabulous resource for family catechesis. Having projects that are being worked on by families together. And you could give families a whole variety of things to work on together. Family mastering the summer months and not just during the school year. Yep, that's an excellent idea. All right, so lots of good thoughts there. Feel free to continue to drop those in the chat. I just want to share with you just a couple of I mentioned some of the online resources that are part of our Family Faith, the resource guide. George and Deb were talking during the break that we'll work on making sure that you have access to get these, but I want you just to see kind of what this looks like very quickly. So this is the digital platform that goes with our Family Faith resource guide. And you'll see it's divided with the same color coding as the book itself. And so there's a planning sheet. These are these are the sessions, the handouts that go with the sessions that are in the book. So if you just wanted to print one, so holy habits, family ritual, virtues, Lectio Divina, and then these are the remaining sessions that are available as digital only in English. It's a separate page for the Spanish. So body image, God in times of suffering, growing closer to Mary, holiness starts at home, living as digital disciples. So lots of resources there. They also include some digital resources within there. Then the other thing I wanted you to see is these are all forms and letters that are in the back part of the book. And the way that we've put them here is so that you can use them yourself. So if you were to go to a family survey, if you download it here, it's a fillable PDF. So you could email this link to your families and then they can type straight onto it. You don't have to recreate it yourself. So we have provided that as a fillable PDF, and you can actually type if you wanted to add a question other than the ones that we provided, you could add a question right there. So we tried to put this together in a way that was just really practical for saving time and energy, and those things that you all need because you do work so hard. And in church ministry, if you're good at your job, they'll give you more. So we were trying to not give you more to do, but to give you some tools to do it well. And so as our time together comes to a close, I have just one more thought I want to share with you. It's been such a gift. So creative courage. Let's talk about this for just a second. So this is the year of St. Joseph. And in the apostolic letter about the year of St. Joseph, and St. Joseph has such a rich connection to our families. I just think about St. Joseph and how he had to think about providing for for the Blessed Virgin Mary and for baby Jesus, and, you know, Jesus as a adolescent and those kinds of things. And, you know, I think about, that was a big job, you know, that was a tall order. And so Pope Francis identifies St. Joseph as our model of creative courage. And he writes, creative courage emerges especially in the way we deal with difficulties. In the face of difficulty, we can either give up and walk away or somehow engage with it. At times, difficulties bring out resources we did not think we had. And I think that this is true when we're trying to figure out the ways to engage with families. You know, it would be easy to throw up our hands and say, it would just be so much easier if you all would just do what I want you to do. But we know that doesn't work that way. And so when we think about the challenge of how do we engage families, of how do we help to reveal to them that great love of God, you know, Pope Francis continues and he says, if at times God seems not to help us, surely this does not mean that we have been abandoned, but instead that we are being trusted to plan, to be creative, and to find solutions ourselves. And so I had this experience just a few months ago where I was just really frustrated with the state of the church. And I was just praying, you know, God, come on, fix this. And in my prayer, I heard in that space in my heart, sorry, I got poked myself in the eye there, but I heard in that space in my heart, I heard God say to me, I'm not asking you to fix the whole institution of the church. I am asking you to love the person in front of you. And that's what God asks us to do. God trusts us to plan, to be creative, to find solutions, and most of all, to love that person, that family, that child, that mom, that grandma, that young adult in front of us. And so I hope that I gave you some ideas, some encouragement to move forward. Again, if you have any questions, if you just want to brainstorm, please be in touch. But thank you for all that you are doing on behalf of the church and on behalf of families, and for the ways that you reflect the love of God to the people in the Archdiocese of Chicago. It has been a gift, and I am so grateful for this time with you.
Thanks so much, Amy. Your presentation was great. I hope that people were inspired by different things that you said and the ideas you shared. It was wonderful. George, I think that you maybe had a few things you were going to say real quick.
Well, I just want to say thank you, Amy. I mean, especially that last reflection was just really powerful to me, and I appreciate that kind of seeing the person in front of you, and that kind of gets us out of that love of seeing that's really important to understand that, especially today. So I thank you for that. And then Deb and I will be talking tomorrow about getting you all access to Flourish and next steps. And you also will be getting 2 other resources from us at no cost. So I hope that will be helpful. My Mass book and our Family Gathers will be coming to you as well. So
Great. Thanks, George. And then I also wanted to add, if you have any questions about, you know, anything presented today, you can either reach out directly to Amy, or you can contact me through my email. Or even if you talk to someone in the breakout rooms, or just, you know, saw someone here that you want to kind of connect with to talk about their program, you know, ways to do family catechesis in your parish, you can reach out to me and I can try to connect you with people in the Archdiocese to help you out that way if you'd like. So if anybody else has final questions, that's all that we had on our end. So thank you so much for joining us. And yeah, if you want to stick around, if you have questions, please feel free. Thanks, everyone.